Welcome aboard the Nautilus, which will take us from Earth to heaven. You may think that's strange to have an old three-masted sailing vessel to represent that mysterious and wondrous journey that each of us will make. But it really all started a number of years ago. I was listening to a CD that had been composed by Tony O'Connor, an Australian composer. It was called The Mariner, and it had gone platinum. And while I was listening to it, I was sitting on the bed, and I was, of course, kind of cross-legged. And all of a sudden, my room transfigured into the deck of an old sailing ship. And this can happen once the Spirit has come to dwell with us. He can transfigure those things around us into whatever experience He wants us to have. And so here I was aboard this ancient sailing vessel, and we were sailing off to some very special land, the land we go to when we are without embodiment. And as a result of this, I wrote a poem called The Silent Mariner, and that won the National Longfellow competition. But I always think in terms of the silent mariner, that silent one that lives with each of us, that part of God that has been given to each of us individually, that guides us, leads us, and I'm certainly not going to say pampers us, but teaches us our lessons, so that we can enter into a world of peace that He has planned for us. So as we aboard this Nautilus, we're going to take a look at some of the things that we're going to cover in these next 26 weeks, I believe. First, we're going to take a look at creation, because Neil Armstrong did say that he who could not understand the nature of the universe could not understand his destiny. And this took me back over 2,000 years ago to a statement that Jesus made in the Gospel of Thomas when His disciples came and asked Him when the end would be. And He said, "Do you know yet the beginning? Because if you know the beginning, you know the end." And to me, that spoke the same words of Neil Armstrong. We must understand the beginning of the universe if we are to understand our destiny, if we're to understand why we're human and where we're going as a human race. So in the process of this, we will be taking a look at creation, the origin of creation. Many people have felt that creationism and, of course, evolution cannot go together, because Darwin's theory of evolution through the law of natural selection always has signified that which is outside, meaning outer to inner. Creationism, on the other hand, defines that which is inner that goes outer. And in that, we're going to learn that our inner is that which draws to us all the material necessary for an outside form, depending on our current degree of progression, that we cannot separate evolution and creation any more than we can tear the skin from our body. So we're going to look at creation, and as we go through creation, we'll understand more about what constitutes the makeup of ourselves. And we're going to approach that subject of creation versus evolution. And as if that isn't enough, we're going to approach something which is very difficult for the Christian to understand, to comprehend, and more to accept. And that is evolution versus reincarnation. It is a dreaded word in the Christian language, because if we, for instance, believe that there was successive lives which enabled us to climb the ladder of the stars, then we would have to change our concepts of how we approach Christianity. It is very easy for us to make the statement, "I've been saved and we have nothing else to worry about." But of course, what I puzzled about so many years ago was the fact that would I be satisfied to sit at the feet of Jesus and to listen to Him for billions and billions of years. To me, I thought there should be more to life than that. And as we proceed, we are going to see that, yes, indeed there is. It was New Testament which led me on the beginning of my own journey. I was in Matthew when I read the two scriptures that Jesus wrote or said, and that was to love God with all your heart and all your soul, and to love each other. And it's always been my concept that perhaps we could even throw the Bible away and just abide by those two primordial rules that Jesus left for us, and we would have a better world. So in my search for God, I put him first, as Jesus had told me. And I suppose at that time I kind of was like everyone else. I probably thought that God was some deity that sits up there in the sky, and that somehow when I pray to him, he knew exactly what I was praying for, and that he would answer me. But as a deity, I did not understand the magnitude of God, who is 150 billion known galaxies. And so I left no stone unturned. I wooed him, I courted him. And when we talk about wooing and courting, I'm not talking about the romance as we think of wooing or courting someone that we might be in love with, but more so that I wooed and courted as a disciple to God. I chose him as my master teacher. And I can remember some of the things I used to do. I'd write him letters when the sun was high in the sky and it was warm, and I would thank him for shining in the sun. I would call upon him or give him gifts by creating them in the eye of my mind. In other words, we don't think about thought being so wondrous that we can actually create a thought form and to send it into the mind of God, into the consciousness of God, or into the consciousness of Jesus, so that we can give gifts of the heart. I did a lot of this in my pursuit of God, and one night I prayed to God to send Jesus back to earth. And I said, if you're not going to send him back, now let me help carry his cross. And a short time after that, I was taken to meet with Jesus. The first plane we went to was the plane where we go when we are without embodiment. And there I saw that nothing that we own or possess upon earth has any effect in the world that we live in when we are not living in embodiment. After watching all of the desires and possessions stripped, per se, from human beings, I was then taken to meet with Jesus in a plane that is much beyond where we dwell when we are not in embodiment. And I was taken to this room, and it overlooked all of the heavens. And it had no windows in it, just open spaces where I could look upon the stars. Within a very short time, Jesus came bounding up the steps. And I can remember the awe that I experienced, the inability to speak. Finally, after a time, I asked him the one question which was closest to my heart. And I've often asked my students, if you met Jesus for the first time, what is that one question you would ask him? My question was, is your Father coming? Jesus smiled at me, and there was great mirth in his eyes. And he said, my Father will come later. So finally, in June 6, 1971, after a tremendous amount of what we classify as mystical experiences, I, at last, came face to face with God. It took a period of about 3 days. I had just put my husband on board an airplane. I then returned home, and shortly after I returned home, I felt a presence in the room unlike any presence that I had ever experienced. It stayed for a half hour.